All right. So, Alan, back in our normal spots again. We have two things we'll talk about today. One being the ILA port strike, which happened from our recording just happened 9 hours, 50 minutes ago, and what that may mean. And secondly, we're going to talk about intake. So, always a hot topic, as hot as topics can get within procurement, intake, and we'll dive into talk through one of the leaders in the space and our thoughts on some path forward.
We want to rebuild.
Rebuild it.
It'll take me a month to rebuild it.
Rebuild.
That's how you rebuild, comrade.
So I'm Tom Finn. I bring 15 years on the client side procurement, finance, category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Veek, a procurement geek who works on the client service side of the street. So we are a managed procurement services company at Summit, and we help our clients do better procurement. I've assembled a crack staff team of procurement professionals who do this, mostly out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
A procurement hub, as you would say.
A hub, yeah, one of the three hubs. You have another hub, Tom? I feel like you've got a hub that you can contribute. You're going to say Philly, aren't you?
I don't know where I sit. I don't know. From a hub standpoint, I guess I don't necessarily think. I think the hubs sometimes go to sector experience. Like you might say, a lot of the IT procurement people are sitting in San Francisco, and a lot of the oil and gas specialty folks are probably down in Houston, things like that. But yours is more from like the
generic standpoint.
Generic standpoint.
It's locus of talent that, like in my dreams, what I have is I have a whole wall that's dedicated to the procurement family tree that shows kind of like early places where A.T. Kearney people were, and then different big companies like Procurian and Free Markets and, I don't know, fill in the blanks, the ones that I know, the Denali's, the Arebas, different hubs developed around different startups that kind of collected talent. That's the only reason why Pittsburgh is on the map of procurement hubs. But Dallas kind of came to mind in the late 2000 aughts, kind of like early days of 2000s. And it seemed like for whatever reason, a lot of companies grew out of Dallas, and a lot of procurement talent was based in Dallas.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. I went there they have the contingent workforce summit, CWS, every year down there. So they also have some good hotels to host conferences too. So I'm sure they pull in some folks down in Dallas. So maybe if we just kick it off with this port strike. So for the ports, now 45,000 port workers going from Maine to Texas. So essentially all the ports on the East Coast and in the South, they're on strike now, officially on strike. So what does that mean? That means all the cargo coming into the East Coast isn't going to come in. And what's included in cargo? Everything from anything manufactured overseas, essentially. So
and I would say, just as importantly, anything going out, which is a bigger volume. More goes out than comes in. Do we export more than we import through those? Through those ports, yeah, we do.
Interesting. Did not know that.
Mm-hmm. And ag is the biggest piece of it, which of course is largely perishable. A lot of it's largely perishable. So that's it's a fairly interesting thing. The inland farmers are largely going to be the ones who feel the pinch the most.
And that's sending majority to Europe?
I think to Europe and to China. It's not an insignificant amount of ag that we send to China.
That's I was only thinking on the import side, but yeah, anything we're sending out, of course, going through the same
You're
ports.
thinking of it like a procurement guy, not a sales guy?
Right. That is exactly what I was doing. Embarrassed to say, watch my cheeks go red. Yeah, I guess I was more thinking, I do think a lot of like, how can I get my stuff, right? That is a lot of times where my mind goes, and probably just how do I get something to my house too? I saw somebody joke on Twitter saying, like, what's the countdown until the toilet paper run? But that kind of thing is true, right?
It's true.
That we all kind of experienced those supply chain disruptions back in early COVID days. But yeah, I mean, those type of things it is easier to start at the consumer level and say, what might I miss? But which is your grocery store items and what you see at Target and Walmart. But then the next step back in the supply chain is things that folks make.
Yeah.
So in order to make certain chemicals, in order to make cars, things need to come in through those ports. And that is definitely something that would lag for production. So you can't make a car today, can't make a car tomorrow. That ends up pushing manufacturing out a number of days. So that'll cause additional disruptions.
Yeah, the only silver lining I thought about was I read specifically that of the ag products that we can't ship out is beef. So, become your favorite carnitarian in the next 3 months because you're going to have a lot of good beef stuck on shore.
Yeah, I guess one silver lining. The economy totally disrupted. However, beef prices plummet as folks are able to consume more too. But yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. So why, right? Why is the ILA doing this? They're asking for not price, but wage increases. So I think they were saying like $5 per year.
$5 per hour per year for the next 6 years, which is a 77% salary increase. So
yeah, and right now the offer is at 50.
Inflation. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I was looking back. So then how does this negotiation take? Oh, well, the other piece is automation. So they want that wage increase, and then they don't want any automation, which is a forward-looking thing. I think we can all kind of not we all, but it's easy to say, oh, that's so why aren't you looking forward, the future, things of that nature. But as I play more and more with ChatGPT and Perplexity and these things, I'm like, all right, well, all that template work I had to do before, gone. All these other things I had to do, gone. Great for now until it can imitate my personality, whether that's right or wrong, good or bad for it, and interact with folks just via chat. That's going to do more for automation of, call it more like the white collar work, the behind the desk, nerd neck kind of work where you slouch over all day. So I think forward looking, that's the same type of thing. Automation has been around for a while. It's more capital intensive to do the ones they're doing, so it does take longer. Ours, in the evening, one night with a rollout.
Yeah, I think this is the most troublesome piece of the whole situation is what appears to be just a complete rejection of progress. Like this is back to the Luddites. You can't stop automation. Automation's going to invariably happen, and it's going to go more slowly than we think. But I think this notion of trying to stop progress is one of the biggest mistakes the ILW is making. So I think that's one that they're certainly going to use. So maybe it's just a bargaining chip they have out there that they're trying to hold on to until they know they got to let it go. But interestingly, on the wage side, I mean, that salary increase that they're talking about is pretty tremendous. It's certainly a sign of a bubble of inflation that's waiting out there to pop. Because to your point, Tom, I think the current bargaining negotiating spot is at 50% wage increase. The ILW is asking for 77% increase. So 2/3 of the increase has been given already.
Yeah, and then they decided to go on strike, and they so what sometimes I was reading back in like 2002, George W. Bush said no, because the federal government can always say stop, right? This is critical to our infrastructure, critical to our economy. You're not allowed to go on strike. And the Teamsters said I think it was along the kind of quoting. I just don't have it in front of me, but it was like stay the F out is what the Teamsters said. Like stay the F out of this bargaining agreement. So it's 5 weeks before an election. Interesting play. Don't know who behind the scenes is making some calls, but it's an interesting chip.
I think to me it feels like you've got to allow a little bit of an earthquake to happen here. So, this instead of going for the 8.0 on the Richter scale, you got to let a little 3.0 happen, let some of the tension off. So I do think the notion of allowing a week or 2 or 3 or 4 of pain to be felt on all sides is probably good before you enact that. I think it's actually an 80-day cooling down period is what they call it. That's the only thing that the executive order can, the president can enact is an 80-day cooling down period.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so I think this is a little bit like the NFL, right? The refs should kind of stay out of the game, let the players battle it out on the field. Don't over officiate. So I don't think that Biden's doing something terrible here by allowing a small temblor to happen. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because there's going to be a lot of pain felt.
Yeah.
5
80
billion
days
a day. That's what I heard. I saw could be up to 5 billion a day.
Yeah, it's tough to. And then where does that 5 billion go? And that perishable is probably a lot up front because you don't stop crops from growing either.
Mm-mm.
That's yeah, that should be interesting. I saw someone comment just on who is on the negotiation side. So you have the ILA on one side, then they negotiate with suits essentially, right? So there's some different folks on that, and 7 of them are. I know there's a specific term, but like the shippers themselves, right? Like the Maersk and the Hapag, those type companies, none of which are American companies anymore, right? They're still profit generating companies, but none of which are American anymore. And that led me to think, okay, so how much are they willing to give? Because a lot of the money, like actually a tremendous amount of money, was made in 2022, specifically 2022. Rates were crazy. I remember trying to ship some stuff during that time, and it was like unbelievable. Like
Yes.
prices that had never been seen before were being charged at that moment because everyone was trying to move stuff, and things were stuck off outside of China, and there's a lot of congestion now less so. So Alan, I put in our doc here, I was trying to pull it out, I would graph it and do something else with it, but it's just good to share. So you can see so Maersk is the only public company of that crowd. Again, 7 of the 13 are these shippers. You can see in Q1 2022, I'm just going to preface this saying I use Perplexity to pull this. I don't want to go through every single quarterly financial. So in Q1 2022, this is like already within the profit generating moment. They were generating about 20 billion per quarter in revenues, and then on the profit side, making anywhere from $6 to $9 billion per quarter throughout 2022. But now, if you go back just Q1 of this year, the income, the revenue itself was probably cut to near half, call it like 60%. And they were negative in Q1. They were also negative in Q4 last year for net income, for profit.
Yep.
And then they turned to profit, it looks, in Q2. But again, still revenue is quite consistent with Q1. So it's just when you're negotiating, if they were able to catch that high, that's when they could say, all right, they'd be like, we're making so much money, we don't care. Just get the folks back on the docks. Now it's a little bit different of a game.
A little bit harder to go back and touch first base and try and pick up those profits. I don't know, it's a complicated thing to try to figure out how to make all this work. It feels to me like there's probably a little bit too much of the close the barn door after the horse is out going on here. If the suits, as you called them, were willing to give on 2/3 of the,
I'm sure they would love that, by the way. The suits,
yeah, it's suits on both sides, but the suits, we know
true.
who we're talking about. Management. Yeah, it does feel like if management gave 2/3 concession on the wage side, it does feel like there should be some appropriate meeting at the table. Just take it and go. But what do I know? There's obviously in all these things, there's a lot of history. So let's hope that they can figure it out between the two of them sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and a lot of probably interesting information will come out over the next 2 weeks as well. Just number that's been automated, like of the 45,000, how many have been displaced over the past 10 years, and that kind of stuff. It's easier to empathize at that point with, but right now they're kind of just playing hardball. And
I had I had a COO once who one of his first jobs out of business school was working for Dole, the fruit people, and he said that he made a point of saying they were racked with strikes at the picker, kind of at the picker level where they pick fruits. And he said then all the way through to manufacturing and into the facilities. He said, so they had these strike problems. So there was a call all the way up the ranks, all the way up to the CEO to man the lines, to come out and do the work. And he said when the management came out and did the work, productivity went up 100%.
No way.
Yeah, way. And so they kind of realized they had more negotiating power than they thought they had. So, it's a fairly interesting thing. You don't know too much what's going on here. There's always inside baseball. I don't know anybody in this industry. So it'll be interesting. It's like it's a circus. Just watch it, enjoy it. You bought the tickets, sit back, eat some popcorn. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, one thing with the union side of things, there ends up within these contract negotiations, there's very clear responsibilities of what someone within the union can and cannot do generally. And when like the management side, like you called them, when they come in, they could do whatever they want.
Yep.
So a lot of that, like the painters paint and carpenters do
Yes.
carpentry, things of that nature. That overlap is sometimes what gets lost because the folks are intelligent and a decent number of them will be hardworking enough, but it's just, everyone minds their lane too.
Which is always a little bit of the pain point with, union labor. Those are laws implied. Those are laws and rules that are enforced by the union itself that drive, that sock productivity, and so feels like we need to be at a more intelligent spot. It does feel like we're at a more intelligent spot than we were, say, 50 or 100 years ago, but it feels like we got a long way to go.
Yep, for sure. All right, so that's the big news happening again within the past 12 hours. The other one that's been happening for the past 4 years.
What about force majeure?
Force majeure.
You had a good post on X about force majeure.
Yeah, just that everyone's going to be doing it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because usually, like, there's always pretty like clear like what is force majeure in even any purchase order terms. And what is force majeure? Force majeure is when something happens outside of your control, generally to be like an act of God or government, or in this case, union type strikes. Strikes, I think, is generally one too. Where if that happens, say I'm in a refinery, I can't get the oil to come in, and then therefore I can't sell the oil. Therefore, I don't have to meet what would be generally considered contractual commitments. And I'm not in breach as long as I let them know that I'm under force majeure. So this happened a lot during COVID, where just say chemical producers or manufacturers, or even car manufacturers, if they have certain commitments to, say Ford needs to sell to the police department, and there's a strike where they can't get their engines from wherever it is overseas, they have a contractual target they need to meet every month. They need to deliver 1,000 cars. Well, there's been a strike for a month. I couldn't get the engines for the cars, therefore I don't have to deliver to you, and that sends ripples through the system. It's a contractual way of making sure that I'm not obligated because I can't do something that's outside of my control. So generally what happens is a company will say, okay, well, this is going to affect me. I'm just going to send a letter, even if it's not going to possibly impact me. I'm just going to start sending my letters because it could.
CYA.
Yeah, CYA is what companies should do, to be honest. If you're affected in any way, you should send it because it could cause more issues than not. And it's just better to cover your butt.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think? Is this going to ruin Christmas?
Christmas. What are we in? October?
We're there. We're in the fourth quarter today. Day one.
Yeah. So that. Yeah. Probably for a lot of Amazon stuff. Well, not if it's coming from China necessarily. It can come through LA. Will it ruin Christmas? I mean, generally those orders are placed like 90 days out plus.
That's right.
So,
I read an article that a lot of companies saw this coming and took evasive action and placed their order even earlier this year. So Christmas shouldn't be ruined.
Yeah, place their order earlier, but then will it get delivered by the date, or will they declare force majeure on them?
Yeah, or will they go choose a different route to bring it in? So all the truckers, all the rail companies are all amping up their capacity to be able to manage more
Ooh,
coming
yeah.
into
Let's
the
see the
West
pop on
Coast.
the rail folks today, huh?
Oh yeah, big time, huge.
On those stocks. Yeah, it does matter. The deliveries one matters because as of today, ships will just they'll start sitting off the coast, and they can't do anything. So yeah, that'll be. I dealt with some of this. I just don't recall the rules around it, like what happens to those ships too, because if they're stuck, there's people on those ships, which is a lot of times what we forget, right?
Yep.
There's like
Companies
people
that
with
are shipping.
families.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
people with
companies that are
families on
shipping
those
have to
ships, like,
pay.
will they make it home for Christmas kind of thing? And they need to. I don't think legally they can stay out so long. Um, that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, force majeure is a hell of a thing when stuff happens outside of your control. That's why it's always good to have a contract. Make sure force majeure is in your templates. That's for certain.
Interesting. Okay, let's switch to the next topic. What do you say?
All right, let's switch. So may I tee this up, Alan? All right.
Please.
So I'm just going to do it then. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about intake. It's a word that was created, I think, just by a company that kind of took off, and a lot of companies, a lot of companies, they struggle with where folks should go to ask for something. So whether I need like kind of like the pencil, pen, those have been placed in little checkout type areas. But like everything else, I need another engineer that I just want to hire part time. I need, these widgets. I need all this stuff. And there might be some disparate systems. There could be like an SAP, but in SAP itself, can you ask for a contract? So there's all these different systems that have come up over time to solve like where is one starting point. And this company that started in 2020, a lot of folks would know, it started by a guy who had sold his company. So he was an entrepreneur, like Silicon Valley type guy, and someone that was working at Airbnb. They started a company called Zip. And Zip wants to be like the single place. I think they call themselves like the front door for procurement, which is just heck of marketing and allows people to kind of resonate with that. So they've done a pretty good job of this marketing thing. But in 2020, they started. Since then, they've raised money with Y Combinator, who we've talked about before. They're a startup incubator that is connected with all the VCs in Silicon Valley. They have this. So thank you, Brandon, pulling it up. They got $100 million funding, call it within the past year, maybe two, at a $1.5 billion valuation. And these guys are just off to the races. And wanted to talk through it a little bit with you, Alan. You put this on here, but the companies they have is like Snowflake, Lyft, Instacart, Sephora, Prudential, and I've used it. The changing piece that they do it better than others isn't necessarily just being a starting point, but it's like more visual. So a lot of things that people get ticked off about just within your company, call it your stakeholders. It's like, where is this? What do I do? What's the timelines?
Yep.
And that it does a much better job of showing. But you're familiar with Zip as well, right, Alan?
Yeah, I am. Actually, I could tell a little bit of a fun history on this industry. So in 2011, when I joined Denali, and our biggest client was Microsoft, we called this triage, and basically we had a 2-hour turnaround time
I
at the
think
front
front
door.
door might be better than
Yeah,
triage.
yeah, for sure. But we had Microsoft as a client, and they were in the early phase of really trying to make it easier with a 2-hour turnaround time, guaranteed SLA back to the business, saying when you reach out to us and say we need to buy something, we'll reach back out to you and let you know how it's going to happen, what you need to do, what the timeline looks like. And we were using basically a homegrown Microsoft tool coded by their internal developers. It's called SmartBuy.
Did it
And
sit on SharePoint? like everything else.
Basically. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't fancy. And it kicked over to us, and we input data into an Excel spreadsheet, and we had humans that kind of managed that intake process. And we, for the longest time, with other clients outside of Microsoft, we tried to find an intake solution. We begged technology partners, please build something. We weren't a tech company ourselves, so we were a managed services company, and throughout the 20 teens couldn't find anybody to build it. Now, fast forward, and you have like basically 15 companies who've built an intake model. It's almost too crowded. But I think that's a good problem to have. That's typically the way that innovation happens. Everybody comes at it from a different way. And more importantly, this technology, I like to think of it as like procurement 3.0 technology. If you think about procurement 1.0 as being Ariba and everything kind of around the .com era, and then procurement 2.0 tech being Coupa. Coupa came out and made Ariba look like a dinosaur, and everybody raced right over to Coupa. That's 2.0. Now we got these 3.0 solutions, to your point, that just look better. They look more like the Amazon shopping experience. And I think that's part of the reason why they're so attractive to stakeholders, to end users, is they are basically, bam, hit the easy button for how to buy things through procurement.
Yeah, and when you talk about like the SLAs, it kind of used to be more like a ticketing system, right? Like
Yes.
I need something, and kind of like where do I fit in your queue? And the procurement team would be the one that kind of still on the back end duct tapes it all together, emails this person, does that, sends out the PO, like does the Word doc with legal. That's what all happens on the back end. And I think the zip and just the visibility, and again, you could now probably like Coupa has probably their own solution. I know they have their own solution, and Procurify and GP, everyone has their own at this point. You can just name every single company, Ariba. So they all have their own. But what it does, so actually, I have an opinion here on just people in general. That when someone's asking for something, they don't necessarily need it right away, but they need updates. So just in general, working with people, if you say you're going to do something on a Friday and it's Monday, and you get to Friday and you're not done it yet, maybe you're almost there, maybe you haven't even touched it, just let the person know.
That's
right?
all you
Just
need to do.
give them an update. Say,
Visibility.
sorry, I didn't even get this started. Other stuff came up, but I'll get it to you by Tuesday. Get it by Tuesday. But that update is super important. They feel heard. They feel understood. They feel prioritized. And what it does within, just call it a workflow solution, that like with a starting point, it just shows that. And they can log on, see where their ask is, where the requisition is. They see where it is. They say, okay, like, I'll ping this person. Not a big deal. I'm happy. I know where it's at. Why was it sitting there for 7 days? Let me ask that person if they have any questions. It just is kind of like that Uber-esque experience where is it annoying to wait 20 minutes for a cab? Yeah, it's worse when I don't know where it's at. If I could see where it's coming and now it's going to be 22, I'm still much more satisfied just like being able to watch it.
Less anxious.
Yeah. But anxious is what causes a lot of issues, anxiety.
For sure it does. Yep. Yeah. So just updating, like it's same thing like you mentioned there with Uber. Happened to me with a flying experience last week. I got to watch where my bag was in real time. So you wonder, okay, did it make it on the plane? Is it going to come out on the belt? When's it going to come out on the belt? When you can actually see where it is, it takes all the mystery out of it, which is what any stakeholder, anybody who's buying something inside a company wants to know. To your point, they don't necessarily need to have it immediately. They just kind of want to know, where is it? Make sure I'm not stuck at the very beginning.
Yeah. And how easy is that kind of solution to, at least like from a thought process, think through? It's like all they have to do is they scan it every time. And when scan, update system and show on Allen's United Delta American app.
Which is, you think through all of the complexities of doing it. Sounds simple to do that, but it just takes time.
Simple, not easy, right? Or easy, not simple.
Easy, not simple. Yeah, it takes a long time to build in all the elements of that system to make it robust enough. So, I think that this current crop of intake solutions is just kind of making that a lot easier. And we're going to see continued innovation here, so that hopefully one day in the world of procurement, we do realize this notion of being as simple as buying something on Amazon.
Yeah. So you deal with a lot of companies, right, Alan? A lot of different types of companies.
Yep.
So manufacturing, I've kind of dealt on both sides myself. There's just say like there's more than this, but there's like the manufacturing side, and there's the tech side, right? And you can insert finance and others maybe in the middle, but manufacturing always lags in these systems. It just does. What are your thoughts on like the forward-looking view between, say, tech and manufacturing companies?
Let's see. Wait, give me a little bit more there when you say the forward.
So just an investment in like new stuff, right? Within the tech industry, they're just a lot more accepting and trying of new things.
Yeah.
Whereas in the manufacturing, they're laggards, right? They've been on an SAP R3, which is like the super old one, since 1972, right? I mean, they don't move fast.
I tend to probably side more with the manufacturer. While I'm personally a more of a tech gadget guy, I like to try the new shiny stuff. I probably, in my deep brain, I resonate more with the manufacturers because bright new shiny is expensive, and you have to wait for a lot of this stuff to play out. So here's a good example. One of my clients was looking into implementing one of these intake solutions next year, and that budget got cut. So they pushed their current installation of Coupa. They pushed their Coupa representatives a little bit harder and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing to make intake better?" And Coupa, man, came with a full brass band. They were like, "Oh,
please try it.
Yeah.
It's free."
Like, yeah, Coupa, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
So to the point where my client actually said, "We think we can make it through 2025 without any bright, shiny new intake solution. Coupa should be able to help it." Now, interestingly, being a managed service provider at Summit, what we recommended to them was don't forget the human in the loop. Don't forget how important the human is to making, maybe that slightly suboptimal Coupa implementation work a little bit better. And so it could mean more business for Summit because humans kind of are the grease, or the lubrication that makes this whole thing work a little bit better.
Yeah, I do also think, and this is neither right nor wrong, but the customer experience, it could just be profit margins, or it could be lack of care of profit within the tech industry in many cases. But they do lean on that customer experience side of things more. Whereas in manufacturing, a lot of cases, like, guys, come on, just deal with it. Like, we don't want to spend $500K, to your point, like things cost money. And manufacturing does a generally better job of managing their margins versus the tech industry. It's either a lot of it not managing margins or just making some crazy amount of money where, like, let's make the experience better. So this is kind of more easy for our folks. But where do you think then, Alan, what's your take? So I'll work this one up. So Zip, right, came out 2020, worth 1.5 billion. They're trying to get every instance they can and pitching everybody. I don't know about you, but every social media I feel like Zip's trying to give me an iPad, of which I'm just not interested in that stuff. But they're heavy marketing is what that means, because they're paying for the spot, they're paying for targeting of me, and then they're paying for an iPad. So with that, they're just really trying to go after Coupa's Lunch, Procurify, probably even Ariba if they can, and they're looking to expand, I would expect, from what I was reading on their website. So where do you think that lands? They were valued at $1.5 billion. Coupa was just bought for $8 billion. Like, what's your thoughts on the land and expand approach if Zip becomes a front door for a lot of companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've got a couple of thoughts about it. First of all, keep in mind when they take $100 million investment, they've got to have someplace to put that money. And like you said, that's why they're pushing the marketing front. That's why they're trying to basically
lots of iPads.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, it's customer acquisition costs, CAC.
Sure.
So-called CAC's going to go up. They're going to spend more on CAC, thinking that the lifetime value of these customers is going to be bigger. What worries me about lifetime value of customers here is right now Zip is just the front door. It's not the house. You can't live in a front door. So I know that they talk a big game about building out all the rest of source to pay behind it, but I'm personally skeptical about that technology to build the rest of source to pay is complicated, and there are a lot of good solutions or good enough solutions that are out there today. I'm skeptical that Zip can build out a robust enough source to pay so that a company like yours or any of our clients could use it end to end. Typically, they're right now they're a point solution. They're a front door. They're a way to make approaching procurement, dealing with procurement at the first step very, very easy. And they're doing that exceedingly well. But to build out a robust back end it's tough. I'm highly skeptical.
Yeah, especially if they're clearly spending a lot of money on the acquisition. Yeah, there's a lot that goes in. I think probably an undervalued piece when you just sort of read headlines of what SAP and Coupa does within an org, from making sure everything's right to reporting. Like if you're public, that's the lifeblood. Every number has to be right. There's not allowed to be a bad calculation in that or
That's
a
right.
miss at all.
That's right. And we know, it's like kind of reading fundamental physics. We know what's going to happen. This overcrowded industry with 15 or 20 players, there's going to be consolidation. There'll be some winners, some losers. Somebody will do a roll-up strategy and put a lot of these intake solutions together. And then the next thing that'll happen is some of the bigger boys, the Coupas, the Aribas, which are the SAPs and the Workdays and Oracles, will buy these intake solutions and do a very bad job of integrating them into their solutions.
Just deprecate them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It is kind of the cool thing if you get to look at them right now, and companies are interested. Mostly, I think, from a end user standpoint. So it'd be interesting, the ones that don't care much about how hard it is. It's kind of just within the policy. You got to do it. It'd be interesting to see what the value is placed on those. I don't see any manufacturing companies on their
No.
on their main page. Which if it was there, then I'd say, if I saw Exxon on it or a Shell or even like a Ford, then I'd say interesting. Like they're doing something else.
Well, what I like about this from our point of view, from Tom and Alan's point of view, is we are, this podcast is dedicated to helping to think through how to rebuild procurement. And I think actually, when you're thinking about rebuilding procurement, from my point of view, you do it at this step. You do it at the front door. You do it at the stakeholder level. You have to make approaching procurement a lot easier. So to me, it almost represents a fundamental philosophical mind reset, where we can say, okay, let's get intake right. And once we get intake right, then we can move further upstream and do further downstream and do other things right inside procurement. We can rebuild step by step. So what do you think comes after? I'll put you on the spot, Tom. What do you think comes after intake? What's the next biggest piece of procurement you'd rebuild next?
Yeah, well, I would just, even before that, I think the biggest piece of value that rolling out any of these solutions is when you map out how your whole process is. So, and really the next step should probably be where the biggest issues are. Just the general flow is like someone starts and then and a lot of these things have kind of been solved for. It's just the connecting, like the legal back and forth. You have like an ironclad or something of that nature. But the general flow is somebody's asking for something. It goes through versions of approvals, mapping those approvals, getting legal sign off, getting the different security, safety, whatever it is, those sign offs, and then the back and forth with the supplier. That's kind of like the intake, like just use Zip or like Coupa, like what they help a lot with. Just even like the public company side of things, or even private, just one good policies, is that approval management. I think they're taking the good stab to the idea of this, taking a good stab of trying just to get everyone in one spot with approvals. But I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of it ends up being at the company level, where there's things that you're probably doing wrong or just inefficiently. Let's say it's not necessarily wrong; it's probably right, but it might be inefficient, that you can delete the and go back to, and kind of to what you were saying, like rebuild from there. You start with the foundation and then build up.
Yeah, I think you actually said it right when you said it's about policy next, because when you think about, okay, if this is the ticketing system and we capture every ticket, every request that comes in the organization, then the next thing we need to do to understand is, okay, where do we put this request? What do we do with this request? And so you have to set those policy limits that say, for something that's high risk or low risk, or something that's high dollar or low dollar, you have all these thresholds that basically have the decision tree that says this goes to catalog, this goes to category management, this goes to straight renewal of contract, this goes to P card. All you have to define those thresholds, and I think a good chief procurement officer will not only have an understanding of how you define those policies in the organization they work in today, but then they can also paint a vision for, okay, in 3 years, we're going to modify that policy to be tighter, better, more productive with spend, so that we're not leaking any spend. We're actually influencing every dollar of spend that comes through the intake channel. And then you just you work to drive execution into the future with continuous improvement. I think so, but I think you nailed it when you said it's the definition of that decision tree, those policies that say how do we influence the spend.
Yeah, and I've been leaning more towards this side of things that, like, if you don't have a large procurement department, it's also what do you focus on? So is it everything, or can those policies themselves, can folks support themselves with proper information, things of that nature, still having some approval processes, but that ends up being sometimes a cultural thing within a company of how it's not necessarily empowerment, but it's kind of like the receipt of empowerment and how someone uses that and understands like the value of each dollar that's flowing out the system. So, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. We can go on all day about this stuff, Alan, but awesome as always. I guess that's the pod.
Yep. That's the pod. Good to see you, Tom. Thanks for everything.
All right.
Chat again soon.
All right. Later.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebuild Procurement podcast. Check in weekly for new episodes and subscribe for alerts.
We want to rebuild.
Rebuild it.
It'll take me a month to rebuild it.
Rebuild.
That's how you rebuild, comrade.
Rebuild.
Show me, and you won't hear the word.
Rebuild.